He mocked a cancer kid's bald head, made the whole cafeteria laugh. His billionaire father found out, walked in with clippers. No warning, no words. Just grabbed his son and shaved him bald while he screamed, "Stop, everyone will laugh at me." Good. Now you'll know what he felt. The boy broke down sobbing, but the lesson was just beginning. If you believe some lessons need to hurt to be learned, smash that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will stay with you forever. The morning sun cast golden rays through the tall windows of the Richardson mansion, illuminating the pristine white marble floors and expensive artwork that lined the walls. In the kitchen, Brandon Richardson sat at the breakfast bar, scrolling through his phone while his untouched bowl of organic granola sat beside him. At 14 years old, Brandon had the kind of confidence that came from never wanting for anything. Designer sneakers, the latest iPhone, a gaming setup that most kids only dreamed about. It was all just normal to him. "Brandon, you're going to be late," his mother called from the hallway, her heels clicking against the floor as she prepared for her yoga class. "I'm good, Mom," Brandon replied without looking up, his thumbs flying across his screen as he responded to messages in the group chat. Mr. Richardson walked into the kitchen, adjusting his tie. David Richardson was a self-made billionaire, having built his tech company from the ground up. At 45, he still maintained the discipline and work ethic that had brought him success. But lately, he'd been worried that his son was growing up with too much privilege and too little character. "Have a good day at school, son," Mr. Richardson said, placing a hand on Brandon's shoulder. "Yeah, Dad. See you tonight," Brandon mumbled, finally grabbing his backpack and heading toward the garage where his mother would drive him to Riverside Middle School in her Mercedes. Mr. Richardson watched his son leave, a knot of concern tightening in his stomach. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about Brandon's attitude lately had been bothering him. There was an arrogance there, a lack of empathy that he recognized from his own younger days before life had taught him harder lessons. He had no idea that today that lesson would come for his son. The hallways of Riverside Middle School buzzed with the usual chaos of teenage energy. Lockers slammed, voices echoed, and the smell of cafeteria food wafted through the corridors. Brandon walked with his usual crew. Tyler, Marcus, and Josh, the kind of boys who thought popularity was the ultimate currency. "Yo, did you see the new Jordans I got?" Tyler was saying, lifting his foot to show off the sneakers. "Nice, but check these out," Brandon countered, showing off his own limited edition pair. "My dad got them directly from Nike's corporate office." They laughed and jostled each other as they made their way to the cafeteria for lunch. It was Tuesday, and Tuesdays meant pizza, the one cafeteria meal that was actually edible. But as they entered the lunchroom, something caught Brandon's attention. Sitting alone at a corner table was a boy Brandon didn't recognize. He looked to be about 12 or 13, thin and pale, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. What caught Brandon's eye and made him stop mid-step was that the boy was completely bald. Not shaved head bald by choice, but smooth, hairless bald. The boy kept his head down, focusing intently on his lunch tray as if willing himself to be invisible. "Dude, who's that?" Marcus whispered, nudging Brandon. Brandon's friends had stopped too, all of them staring at the new kid. "I don't know, but check out his head," Tyler snickered. Something mean-spirited rose up in Brandon, that desire to get a laugh from his friends, to maintain his position as the funny one, the bold one. He didn't think about consequences. He didn't think about the person behind the appearance. He just wanted to perform. "Hey," Brandon called out, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. Several students turned to look. The bald boy glanced up, his eyes wide with apprehension. "Nice bowling ball head," Brandon shouted, and his friends erupted in laughter. The cafeteria wasn't completely silent, but enough students had heard that pockets of laughter spread through the room. Brandon, emboldened by the response, continued, "What happened, man? Forget to pay your barber?" He ran his hand over his own thick brown hair mockingly. Tyler jumped in. "Nah. He probably lost a bet." The bald boy's face had gone from pale to red. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped his lunch tray. Brandon could see the kid's eyes getting watery, but that didn't stop him. If anything, the reaction spurred him on. "Yo, do you polish that thing? I can see my reflection from here," Brandon called out, and his crew doubled over laughing. Finally, the boy stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He grabbed his tray, dumped it in the trash without eating anything, and practically ran out of the cafeteria. Brandon watched him go, feeling a surge of satisfaction at having entertained his friends. What Brandon didn't see was Mrs. Chen, the 7th grade English teacher, standing near the entrance. She had witnessed the entire exchange, and her face was set in a grim expression. She knew exactly who that boy was and why his head was bald. His name was Alex Martinez, and he had just returned to school after 8 months of chemotherapy treatment for acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone and walked briskly toward her classroom. She had Mr. Richardson's contact information from the parent directory. This couldn't wait. David Richardson was in the middle of a board meeting, reviewing third-quarter projections with his executive team, when his phone buzzed. He normally silenced it during meetings, but he'd forgotten this time. Glancing at the screen, he saw it was a call from Riverside Middle School. His heart skipped. Schools didn't usually call unless something was wrong. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to his team, stepping out of the conference room and into his private office. "This is David Richardson." "Mr. Richardson, this is Stephanie Chen, one of the teachers at Riverside. I'm calling about Brandon." David's grip tightened on the phone. "Is he hurt? Is he in trouble?" "He's not hurt, but there's been an incident I think you need to know about." "Mrs. Chen's voice was professional but carried an edge of disappointment. Today at lunch, Brandon publicly mocked and bullied another student, a young boy named Alex Martinez, who just returned to school after months of cancer treatment. David felt his stomach drop. "Cancer treatment?" "Yes. Alex is 12 years old and has been battling leukemia. He lost his hair due to chemotherapy." Brandon made cruel jokes about his appearance in front of the entire cafeteria. Alex left in tears without eating lunch. There was silence on the line as David processed this information. His son, his boy whom he'd tried to raise with values and kindness, had done this? "Are you certain it was Brandon?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. "I witnessed it myself, Mr. Richardson. I'm calling you first because I believe this is an opportunity for a teaching moment rather than just punishment. But I wanted you to know what happened. Thank you for calling me, Mrs. Chen. I'll handle this. Today, I promise you this will be addressed." "I appreciate that, Mr. Richardson. Alex is a wonderful boy who has been through more than any child should have to endure. The last thing he needs is this kind of treatment." After hanging up, David sat in his office chair, staring out at the city skyline. His hands were trembling not from anger, but from a deep disappointment that cut to his core. He had given Brandon everything, but somehow he'd failed to give him the most important thing: empathy. He thought about his own childhood, growing up with very little, watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep food on the table. He remembered being mocked for his second-hand clothes, for his worn-out shoes. He remembered how much those words had hurt, how they'd made him feel small and worthless. And now his son had become the bully. David picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Something's come up that I need to handle personally." Then he made another call to a medical supply store. Brandon came home that afternoon feeling pretty good about himself. The guys had been quoting his jokes all day, and he'd gotten plenty of laughs. He'd already forgotten about the bald kid, moved on to thinking about the new video game he wanted to download. He tossed his backpack on the floor and headed straight for the kitchen, grabbing a soda from the refrigerator. The house was quiet. His mom was still out, probably at her book club or getting her nails done. "Brandon." The voice came from behind him, and Brandon jumped slightly, turning to see his father standing in the doorway to the living room. Mr. Richardson was home early, which was unusual, and he was still wearing his work suit, which meant he'd come straight from the office. "Oh, hey, Dad. You're home early," Brandon said, taking a sip of his soda. "Come into the living room. We need to talk." Something in his father's tone made Brandon's stomach clench. This wasn't the usual, "How was your day?" voice. This was serious. Brandon followed his father into the massive living room with its vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens. But what caught his attention immediately was the wooden chair that had been placed in the center of the room, positioned on a white sheet spread across the marble floor. Sitting on the side table next to the chair was a set of professional hair clippers, still in their packaging. "Dad, what's going on?" Brandon asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. "Sit down," Mr. Richardson said, pointing to the chair. "Why? What is this?" "Brandon, sit down. Now." There was no yelling, no anger in his father's voice, just a calm, unshakable authority that Brandon had rarely heard before. Slowly, Brandon moved toward the chair and sat down, his eyes darting between his father and the clippers. "I got a call from your school today," Mr. Richardson began, opening the package and removing the clippers. He plugged them into a nearby outlet, and the cord stretched across the pristine floor. Brandon's mouth went dry. "What? What kind of call?" "From Mrs. Chen, your English teacher." Mr. Richardson held the clippers in his hand, testing them. The buzzing sound filled the cavernous room, loud and ominous. Then he turned them off. Brandon's heart was pounding now. He had a sinking feeling he knew where this was going. "She told me what you did today at lunch, about Alex." "Dad, it was just—" "Don't." Mr. Richardson held up his hand. "Don't tell me it was just a joke. Don't tell me everyone was laughing. Don't make excuses." Brandon's face flushed. "I didn't mean anything by it. It was just—" He looked weird. "And I was just joking around with my friends." "He looked weird," Mr. Richardson repeated slowly. "Tell me, Brandon, do you know why Alex looks the way he does?" Brandon shrugged uncomfortably. "I don't know." "Bad haircut?" "No." Mr. Richardson moved closer, standing directly in front of his son. "Alex Martinez is 12 years old. For the past 8 months, he has been undergoing chemotherapy treatment for leukemia. Do you know what that means?" Brandon shifted in his seat. "He has cancer?" "Yes, he has cancer. And the treatment to save his life, the chemicals they pump into his body to kill the cancer cells, also kills his hair follicles. He didn't choose to be bald, Brandon. It's the visible scar of a battle he's been fighting just to stay alive." The reality of what he'd done was starting to sink in, and Brandon felt his face burning with shame. I didn't know that. You didn't ask. You didn't think. You just saw someone who looked different and decided to make him a target for entertainment." Mr. Richardson picked up the clippers again. "Today, at lunch, you humiliated a child who has been through more pain and fear than you can possibly imagine. You made him feel small, worthless, alone." "Dad, I'm sorry. I really am. I'll apologize tomorrow, I promise." "Oh, you'll apologize. But first, you're going to understand what you did." Mr. Richardson turned on the clippers. The buzzing sound seemed even louder than before, vibrating through the room. Brandon's eyes went wide. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Teaching you the most important lesson you may ever learn." No, Dad, please." But Mr. Richardson had already moved behind the chair. He placed a gentle but firm hand on Brandon's shoulder as Brandon tried to stand up. "Sit still, son." "Dad, please don't do this." "I said I was sorry. I'll never do it again, I promise." "I know you won't. Because after today, you'll finally understand why." The clippers touched Brandon's head, and the first section of his thick brown hair fell away. "Dad, stop, please. Everyone at school will laugh at me." Mr. Richardson paused for just a moment, the clippers still buzzing. "Yes, they will. And now you know exactly how Alex felt." He continued shaving, methodically, carefully. Brandon's protests turned to tears as he watched clumps of his hair fall onto the white sheet below. He tried to reach up and stop his father's hand, but Mr. Richardson gently moved it away. "Why are you doing this to me?" Brandon sobbed. "Because you need to stand in someone else's shoes before you can understand their pain," Mr. Richardson said quietly, his own voice thick with emotion. "Because I love you too much to let you grow into someone who laughs at another person's suffering." Stripe by stripe, Brandon's head was shaved clean. The clippers hummed steadily, and more hair fell, hair that Brandon had always taken for granted, had run his fingers through without a second thought, had styled each morning as part of his identity. When it was done, Mr. Richardson turned off the clippers and set them aside. Brandon sat in the chair, his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking with sobs. His scalp felt strange, cold, exposed, vulnerable. Mr. Richardson walked around to face his son and knelt down, pulling Brandon's hands away from his face. "Look at me," he said gently. Brandon raised his tear-stained face, his newly bald head shining under the living room lights. "This is what Alex sees every single morning when he looks in the mirror," Mr. Richardson said. "Except when he sees it, he's not just seeing baldness. He's seeing a reminder that his body is fighting for its life. He's remembering the nausea, the pain, the fear. He's thinking about hospital rooms and needles and test results." "I didn't know," Brandon whispered. "That's the problem. You didn't ask. You didn't care to know." Mr. Richardson's voice softened. "Brandon, you're not a bad kid. But today you did a bad thing. And I needed you to feel what he feels, so that you'll never forget this moment. Everyone at school is going to make fun of me tomorrow," Brandon said, his voice breaking. "Probably. Some will whisper, some will stare, some might even mock you." Mr. Richardson put his hands on both sides of Brandon's face. "And it will hurt. It will make you feel exposed and embarrassed and angry. And that's exactly how you made Alex feel. Except, he didn't do anything to deserve it. He's just trying to survive." The weight of understanding crashed down on Brandon like a wave. His tears came harder. But they were different now, not tears of self-pity, but tears of genuine remorse. "He must have been so scared," Brandon choked out, "coming back to school after all that. And I made it worse. I made him feel like a freak." Mr. Richardson pulled his son into a tight embrace, and Brandon collapsed against his father's shoulder, crying in a way he hadn't since he was a small child. "He's 12 years old, Brandon. 12. He should be worrying about homework and video games and what to wear to school. Instead, he's been fighting to stay alive. And when he finally got strong enough to come back to normal life, you made him regret it. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I know you are, but I'm not the one you need to apologize to." Mr. Richardson held his son at arm's length, looking him in the eyes. "Tomorrow, you're going to school with that bald head. And you're going to experience what Alex experiences every single day. You'll feel the stares. You'll hear the whispers. Maybe you'll hear some of the same jokes you made." Brandon nodded, wiping at his eyes with his sleeve. "And then you're going to find Alex and you're going to apologize. Not because I'm forcing you to, but because you truly understand what you did wrong." "I will. I promise." They sat there for a long moment, father and son, surrounded by the fallen hair that represented more than just a physical change. It represented the shedding of ignorance, of cruelty, of thoughtlessness. Finally, Mr. Richardson stood and helped Brandon to his feet. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." As they walked toward the bathroom, Brandon caught sight of himself in the hallway mirror. He stopped, staring at his reflection. He looked so different, so exposed, so vulnerable. His scalp was pale where his hair used to protect it, and he could see the shape of his skull in a way he never had before. And for the first time, he truly understood. Later that night, after dinner that no one had much appetite for, Brandon sat in his room, running his hands over his smooth head. It felt so strange. Every time he touched it, he was reminded of what he'd done, of the lesson his father had taught him. There was a knock on his door. "Come in," Brandon called. Mr. Richardson entered, carrying his laptop. He sat down on the edge of Brandon's bed. "I want to show you something," he said, opening the laptop. For the next hour, Mr. Richardson shared information about childhood cancer with Brandon. They looked at statistics over 400,000 children diagnosed worldwide each year. They watched videos of kids in hospitals, bravely facing treatments that made them violently ill. They read stories of families struggling with medical bills, of parents sleeping in hospital chairs for months, of siblings who had to grow up too fast because their brother or sister was fighting for life. "This is what Alex has been living through," Mr. Richardson explained. "While you were complaining about wanting the newest gaming console, Alex was wondering if he'd live to see his 13th birthday." Brandon absorbed it all in silence, his heart growing heavier with each story, each image, each statistic. "I want you to understand something," Mr. Richardson continued. "What I did today, shaving your head, was just a tiny glimpse into Alex's experience. Your hair will grow back in a few months, and this will become a memory. For Alex, The trauma of what he's been through will stay with him forever. The fear, the pain, the loss of normalcy, it all leaves scars that you can't see. How do I make it right? Brandon asked, his voice small. You start tomorrow with a sincere apology, but more importantly, you carry this lesson forward. You think before you speak. You consider how your words and actions affect others. You choose kindness, especially toward those who are struggling. Brandon nodded, his hand unconsciously going to his bald head again. Dad? Yes. Thank you. Mr. Richardson looked surprised. For what? For caring enough to teach me this way. I know it was hard for you too. Brandon's voice cracked. I could see it in your eyes when you were cutting my hair. You didn't want to do it, but you knew I needed to learn. Mr. Richardson felt his own eyes getting moist. He reached out and pulled his son into another embrace. I love you, Brandon. And part of loving you means not letting you become someone who causes pain to others. The world has enough cruelty in it. I need you to be part of the solution, not the problem. I will be. I promise. That night, Brandon lay in bed, unable to sleep. He kept thinking about Alex, about what it must be like to be 12 years old and facing death, about how scary it must have been to walk back into school after months away, about how much courage it took to show up at all, and he had destroyed that courage with a few thoughtless words. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. He needed to make this right. The next morning, Brandon woke up early, before his alarm. For a moment, he forgot about his head, but then his hand brushed against his scalp, and it all came rushing back. He got out of bed and stood in front of his bathroom mirror, really looking at himself. Without his hair, he looked younger, more vulnerable. His ears seemed to stick out more. The shape of his head was on full display. He could see every contour, every imperfection. This is what Alex sees every day, he reminded himself. Getting dressed felt strange. He usually spent time styling his hair, but there was nothing to style now. He put on a simple t-shirt and jeans, grabbed his backpack, and headed downstairs. His mother was already in the kitchen, and when she saw him, her eyes widened. Mr. Richardson had explained everything to her last night, and while she'd had her own thoughts about his methods, she understood the lesson her husband was teaching their son. Good morning, sweetheart, she said carefully. Morning, Mom, Brandon replied, his voice quiet. Mr. Richardson came down a moment later, dressed for work. He looked at Brandon and nodded approvingly. Ready? As ready as I'll ever be, Brandon said. The drive to school was quiet. Brandon stared out the window, watching the familiar streets pass by. His stomach was in knots. He knew what was coming, the stares, the whispers, maybe even the jokes. Part of him wanted to stay in the car, to refuse to get out. But then he thought about Alex, who had to face this every single day, and he found his courage. When they pulled up to the school entrance, Mr. Richardson turned to his son. Brandon, I'm proud of you for facing this. It takes courage to confront what you've done and make it right. Thanks, Dad. Remember this discomfort you're feeling? It's temporary for you, but it's permanent for Alex. Let that guide how you treat him and others from now on. Brandon nodded and got out of the car. The moment Brandon entered the school building, he felt the weight of 100 stares. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as students noticed his shaved head. He kept his eyes forward, walking toward his locker, but he could hear the whispers starting. Dude, is that Brandon? What happened to his hair? Did he lose a bet or something? He looked so weird. Each whisper felt like a small cut. Brandon's face burned, and he wanted nothing more than to disappear. He fumbled with his locker combination, his hand shaking slightly. Tyler and Marcus appeared beside him, their expressions a mix of shock and amusement. Bro, what happened to your head? Tyler asked, reaching out as if to touch Brandon's scalp. Brandon stepped back. Don't. Did you lose a bet? Did your dad make you do it? Marcus pressed. It's complicated, Brandon said, closing his locker. Look, I gotta go. I'll catch you guys later. He walked away before they could ask more questions, heading toward the library. He needed a few minutes to collect himself before facing the cafeteria at lunch, the place where this had all started. In the library, Mrs. Chen was shelving books. When she saw Brandon, her expression softened with understanding. Mr. Richardson, she said quietly, approaching him. I heard you might be here today. My dad called you? He did. He explained what he'd done and why. She paused. That took a lot of courage from both of you. Mrs. Chen, can you tell me, is Alex here today? I need to find him. I need to apologize. He's here. I saw him this morning. He usually spends lunch in the library, actually, rather than the cafeteria. Brandon's heart sank. Of course, Alex avoided the cafeteria because of what Brandon had done there. When you see him, can you tell him I'm looking for him, that I need to talk to him? I will. But Brandon? Mrs. Chen placed a hand on his shoulder. Make sure your apology is real. Alex has been hurt enough. Don't apologize just because your father made you. I won't, I promise. I really need him to know how sorry I am. The morning crawled by. Brandon could barely focus in his classes. Teachers noticed his new appearance but didn't comment, though he saw the questions in their eyes. Students were less subtle. He caught stares in every class, heard whispers in every hallway. In third period math, someone behind him whispered, "Maybe he has cancer too," and someone else snickered in response. The comment hit Brandon like a physical blow. That's what people might think about Alex, that his illness was somehow funny, something to joke about. By the time lunch rolled around, Brandon's resolve had only strengthened. He knew what he had to do. He walked into the cafeteria, and the noise level dipped as people noticed him. He ignored the stares and headed straight for the lunch line, got his food, and then instead of going to his usual table where Tyler, Marcus, and Josh were already sitting and waving him over, he went to the library. Mrs. Chen was at the front desk and gave him an encouraging nod, pointing toward the back corner where a small figure sat hunched over a book. Alex. Brandon's heart pounded as he approached. The boy looked even smaller and more fragile than Brandon remembered. He was reading a comic book, completely absorbed. His thin shoulders curved protectively over the pages. "Alex?" Brandon said softly. Alex looked up, and when he saw who it was, fear flashed across his face. He started to gather his things, preparing to leave. "Wait, please," Brandon said quickly, setting his lunch tray on the table. I need to talk to you. Please." Alex hesitated, his eyes darting between Brandon and the exit. "I'm not here to mess with you. I promise. I need to apologize." Slowly, Alex sat back down, though he looked ready to bolt at any moment. Brandon sat across from him, and for a moment, he didn't know how to start. How do you apologize for something so cruel? How do you put into words the regret and shame and understanding that had been building inside him since yesterday? "I'm sorry," he finally said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry for what I said yesterday. It was cruel and stupid, and I had no idea what you've been through." Alex stared at him, silent, his expression unreadable. "My dad, when he found out what I did, Brandon ran his hand over his bald head. "He shaved my head to teach me a lesson." "He shaved your head?" Alex's voice was small, uncertain. "Yeah. And he told me about you, about your leukemia, about the chemotherapy, about how you've spent the last 8 months fighting just to stay alive." Brandon felt tears burning in his eyes. "And here I was, making jokes about something you had no control over. Something that's a reminder of the hardest thing you've ever been through." Alex's own eyes were getting watery now. "I spent last night thinking about you," Brandon continued. "About how brave you must be to go through all that. About how scary it must have been to come back to school. And I ruined it. I made you feel like a freak when you're actually the bravest person I know." A tear rolled down Alex's cheek. "It was really hard," he whispered. "Coming back. I was so scared everyone would stare at me and think I was weird." "I made that fear come true," Brandon said, his own voice thick with emotion. "And I can't tell you how sorry I am. I know sorry doesn't fix it. I know it doesn't take back what happened. But I need you to know that I understand now. I get it. Your dad really shaved your head just to teach you?" "Yeah. And at first I was so mad at him. I thought it was the worst punishment ever. But then I walked through school today, and I felt everyone staring. I heard the whispers. Someone even made a joke about me maybe having cancer too." Brandon shook his head. "And I realized I'm only going through this for a little while. You've been living with this, and you didn't do anything to deserve it." Alex wiped at his eyes with his sleeve. The chemo was awful. I was so sick all the time. And the worst part was watching my hair fall out in clumps. My mom would find it on my pillow every morning. It made everything feel so real, you know? Like I couldn't pretend I was just a normal kid anymore. I can't imagine how hard that was. And yesterday, when you said those things, it was like all my worst fears were true. That everyone would see me as less than, as broken. You're not broken, Brandon said firmly. You're a survivor. You're someone who fought cancer and won. That makes you stronger than anyone else in this school. They sat in silence for a moment, and then Alex spoke again, his voice barely audible. Do people think you have cancer now because of your head? I don't know. Maybe. But if they do, I'm going to tell them the truth that I shaved it to understand what you're going through. That I was a jerk who needed to learn empathy. Alex looked at Brandon with something like wonder. You'd really tell people that? Yeah, because it's the truth. And because maybe if other people hear about what you've been through, they'll treat you better than I did. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Alex reached across the table and touched Brandon's bald head, then his own. We match now, he said, and there was the tiniest hint of a smile on his face. Brandon felt his heart lift. Yeah, we do. Thank you for apologizing, Alex said. Most people who are mean just keep being mean. You actually tried to understand. I should have understood from the beginning. I should have asked questions instead of making assumptions. They talked for the rest of lunch period. Alex told Brandon about his treatment, the long days in the hospital, the nausea from chemo, the fear when his blood counts dropped too low. He talked about missing school, missing his friends, missing just being a normal kid. Brandon listened to every word, absorbing Alex's story, committing it to memory so he would never forget the human cost of his cruelty. When does your hair start growing back? Brandon asked. It already is, actually. Really slowly. The doctors say I should have some peach fuzz in a few months. Alex ran his hand over his head. I kinda got used to being bald, though. It's easier than dealing with hair. Honestly. How long did you have left of treatment? I actually just finished. Last week was my final scan, and the doctor said I'm in remission. That's why I came back to school. That's amazing. That's incredible news. Yeah. Alex smiled, a real smile this time. I'm really lucky. Not everyone makes it. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Both boys stood up, gathering their things. Hey, Alex, Brandon said as they walked toward the library exit. Would you maybe want to hang out sometime, like outside of school? Alex looked surprised. Really? Yeah, I mean, if you want to. No pressure, I'd like to get to know you better. As friends. I'd like that, Alex said, and his smile grew wider. As they walked into the hallway together, two bald boys side by side, Brandon noticed something shift in the atmosphere. Students who had been whispering about him earlier now looked at him, and Alex with curiosity rather than mockery. Some even nodded or smiled as they passed. Tyler and Marcus approached, looking uncertain. Hey man, we've been looking for you, Tyler said. You okay? Brandon glanced at Alex, then back at his old friends. Yeah, I'm good. Actually, I want you guys to meet someone. This is Alex. He just came back to school after beating cancer. Tyler and Marcus's expressions shifted from confusion to respect. Whoa, seriously? Marcus said. That's intense, man. Congrats on beating it. Thanks, Alex said shyly. Alex, these are my friends Tyler and Marcus. Well, they were my friends when I was being an idiot. I'm hoping they'll still be my friends now that I'm trying to be better. Tyler punched Brandon lightly on the shoulder. Don't be dramatic. We're still friends. But dude, you should have told us why you were being weird yesterday. We wouldn't have laughed if we'd known. I know. I should have done a lot of things differently. The group walked together to their next class, and Brandon felt something he hadn't expected to feel today. Hope. Hope that he could be better. Hope that he could make a real difference. Hope that this painful lesson would change him for good. 3 weeks had passed since the incident, and Brandon's hair was just starting to grow back in a thin, fuzzy layer. Alex's hair was growing too, slightly faster than Brandon's since he'd been bald longer. The two boys had become genuine friends. They ate lunch together every day, sometimes in the cafeteria, Sometimes in the library, Brandon had introduced Alex to his other friends, and slowly, Alex was becoming part of the group. But more than that, Brandon had changed in ways that went deeper than hair growth. He'd started researching childhood cancer organizations and had convinced his father to make a substantial donation to the Children's Leukemia Foundation. Together, they'd also started planning a fundraiser at Riverside Middle School to raise awareness about childhood cancer. One afternoon, Brandon and Alex were sitting in Brandon's room, the same room where Brandon had learned about Alex's journey weeks earlier. They were working on posters for the upcoming fundraiser, surrounded by markers and poster boards. "What do you think about this one?" Alex held up a poster that read, "Be bold. Go bald for kids with cancer." Brandon laughed. "I like it. Very on brand for us." Alex grinned. "I figured we're basically the poster children for this cause now. Literally." "Speaking of which," Brandon said, setting down his marker, "I wanted to ask you something. Would you be okay with me sharing our story at the fundraiser? Like actually telling people what happened, what I did, and what I learned?" Alex considered this. "You mean tell them you bullied me?" "Yeah, I know it's embarrassing for me, but I think it might help other kids understand. Help them think before they judge someone who looks different." "It might be hard for you," Alex said carefully. "People might see you differently. I know. But you went through something way harder than embarrassment. And if sharing my story can prevent even one kid from going through what I put you through, it's worth it." Alex smiled. "Then yeah, I'm okay with it. Actually, I think it's really brave. Not as brave as you." "Stop it," Alex said, throwing a wadded-up piece of paper at Brandon. "You keep saying that. Because it's true. You fought cancer and won. That's literally the definition of brave." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, their friendship now natural and genuine. Brandon's mother brought up snacks, and when she saw the two boys working together, she couldn't help but smile. She'd seen the change in her son, a depth of empathy and awareness that hadn't been there before. Later, as the sun began to set and cast orange light through Brandon's windows, Alex packed up his things to head home. "Same time tomorrow?" Brandon asked. "Yeah. We still have like 20 more posters to make." "Cool, hey Alex?" "Yeah? Thanks for giving me a second chance. Not everyone would have." Alex slung his backpack over his shoulder. "You know what my mom told me when I was going through treatment?" "What?" "She said that cancer doesn't just change your body, it changes how you see the world. It makes you see what really matters." He paused at the doorway. "I think maybe you went through your own kind of change. Different from mine, but important too." After Alex left, Brandon sat alone in his room, thinking about those words. His hand went to his head, a habit he'd developed, feeling the short stubble that was slowly becoming hair again. His father appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "How's the fundraiser planning going?" "Good. Really good, actually." Brandon looked at his dad. "Dad, I've been thinking, after the fundraiser, I want to keep doing this. Like, maybe volunteer at the children's hospital or something. Keep helping kids who are going through what Alex went through." Mr. Richardson felt pride swell in his chest. This was the son he'd hoped to raise, not one who never made mistakes, but one who learned from them and became better. "I think that's an excellent idea. We can look into volunteer opportunities together." "And Dad?" Brandon's voice grew quieter. "I know what you did. Shaving my head was hard for you too. I could see it. But, thank you. I needed that lesson." Mr. Richardson walked into the room and sat down beside his son. "You know, when Mrs. Chen called me that day, my first instinct was to be angry, to ground you, take away your phone, your games, all the usual punishments. Why didn't you? Because I realized that punishment without understanding doesn't change anything. You'd have been mad at me. You'd have served your time, and then you'd have gone right back to who you were." He put his arm around Brandon's shoulders. "But making you feel what Alex felt, that created real change. It reached your heart, not just your head." "It did. I still think about that day every time I see someone who looks different or who's going through something hard. It changed how I see people. That's empathy, son, and it's one of the most important things a person can have." They sat together for a moment, father and son, connected by a difficult lesson that had ultimately brought them closer. "I'm proud of you, Brandon. Not because you're perfect, but because when you made a mistake, You had the courage to truly face it and change. 2 weeks later, Riverside Middle School's gymnasium was transformed. Colorful banners hung from the walls. Tables were set up with information about childhood cancer, and a small stage had been erected at one end. Students, teachers, and parents filled the space, all there to support the Bald and Brave fundraiser that Brandon and Alex had organized. The turnout was better than anyone had expected. The local news had even sent a reporter after hearing about the story behind the event. Brandon stood backstage, his palms sweating. His hair had grown back enough that he looked more like himself now, though he'd chosen to keep it very short. Alex stood beside him, offering moral support. "You ready?" Alex asked. "Nervous, but yeah, I'm ready." Mrs. Chen stepped onto the stage to introduce them. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out to support childhood cancer awareness and research. Tonight, we have two very special young men who want to share their story with you. Please welcome Brandon Richardson and Alex Martinez." The gymnasium erupted in applause as the two boys walked onto the stage together. Brandon stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. He could see his parents in the front row, his mother wiping tears from her eyes already, his father giving him an encouraging nod. "Hi everyone, my name is Brandon Richardson, and this is my friend Alex Martinez." He took a deep breath. "I'm going to be honest with you all about something I'm not proud of. A few weeks ago, I was a bully." The gymnasium grew quiet. Alex had just returned to school after 8 months of chemotherapy treatment for leukemia. He lost his hair because of the treatment that saved his life. And when I saw him in the cafeteria that day, I mocked him. I made cruel jokes about his appearance in front of everyone. I made him feel small and ashamed when he should have been celebrated for being a survivor. He could see some students shifting uncomfortably, some nodding in recognition. My dad found out what I did, and he taught me a lesson I'll never forget. He shaved my head, all of it, so I could understand what Alex experienced every day. And it was one of the hardest and most important lessons of my life. Brandon paused, gathering his thoughts. Walking through school with a bald head, I felt every stare. I heard every whisper. I experienced a tiny fraction of what Alex has been living with, and I realized something. We never know what battles someone else is fighting. We never know what courage it took for them just to show up that day. He gestured to Alex, who stepped forward to join him at the microphone. Alex is 12 years old, and he's already braver than most adults I know. He fought cancer. He endured treatments that made him violently sick. He spent months away from friends, school, everything normal. And when he came back, I tried to make him regret it. Alex put a hand on Brandon's shoulder, a gesture of forgiveness and friendship. But Alex did something incredible. Brandon continued. He forgave me. He gave me a second chance. And together, we've organized this fundraiser because we want everyone to understand what childhood cancer really means. Over 400,000 children are diagnosed with cancer every year. Hair loss isn't just cosmetic. It's a visible reminder of a battle no child should have to fight. Brandon's voice grew stronger now, more passionate. I'm standing here today to tell you that empathy isn't something we're born with, it's something we learn. Sometimes we learn it the hard way, but we have to learn it, because without empathy, we create a world where people feel alone in their struggles. And that's not the kind of world I want to live in anymore. Alex took the microphone. "I want to thank Brandon for having the courage to share our story. When he bullied me, it hurt. But what hurt more was feeling like I was alone, like no one understood what I was going through. Brandon's dad taught him an important lesson, and now Brandon is teaching all of us. Choose kindness. Teach kindness. Live kindness." The gymnasium erupted in applause. Many people were crying, now parents, teachers, even some of the students who'd witnessed that day in the cafeteria. Brandon and Alex stood together, two boys who had been brought together by cruelty but had built a friendship on understanding and compassion. When the applause died down, Brandon spoke one more time. "Tonight, we're raising money for childhood cancer research. But more importantly, we're raising awareness. We're starting a conversation about empathy, about kindness, about seeing past what's on the surface to the person underneath. I challenge everyone here, students, especially, to think before you judge, to ask questions before you make assumptions, to choose kindness even when it's not the easy choice. 6 months later, Brandon and Alex sat on the front steps of Riverside Middle School during lunch break. Both boys now had full heads of hair again. Brandon's thick and brown as before. Alex's slightly different texture from the chemo, but growing and strong. The fundraiser had raised over $50,000 for childhood cancer research. More importantly, it had started a ripple effect through the school. Students were kinder. Bullying incidents had decreased. There was a new awareness, a new culture of empathy. "Did you see the new kid this morning?" Alex asked, biting into his sandwich. "The one with the leg braces?" "Yeah. I saw some 8th graders making fun of him." Brandon's jaw tightened. "What did you do?" "I walked right up to them and asked if they knew his story. They didn't. So I told them about how he has cerebral palsy and that he's literally training for adaptive sports competitions. That he's probably worked harder to walk across that hallway than they've worked at anything in their lives." "What did they say?" "They apologized. Actually apologized. And then one of them went over and introduced himself." Alex smiled. "I think our fundraiser actually changed things here." "Good." Brandon felt proud not of himself, but of his friend, of their school, of the change they'd helped create. "You know what's weird?" Alex said thoughtfully. "I used to hate that I had cancer. I hated what it did to me, what it took from me. But now, I don't know. It taught me things. It made me stronger. And it brought us together. I used to think being popular was the most important thing," Brandon admitted. "Having the right clothes, the right friends, saying the right things to get laughs. Now I realize that stuff doesn't matter at all. What matters is how you treat people. What matters is being someone who makes the world better, not worse." "Deep thoughts from Brandon Richardson," Alex teased. "Shut up," Brandon laughed, pushing his friend playfully. They sat in comfortable silence, watching students mill around the courtyard. Two boys who had been brought together by a painful lesson but had emerged as genuine friends, as better people. Brandon's phone buzzed. It was a text from his dad. "Proud of you every day, son. Love, Dad." Brandon smiled and showed the message to Alex. "Your dad's pretty cool," Alex said. "Yeah, he is. Even when he's shaving my head against my will," Brandon joked. "Especially then," Alex corrected. "That's when he was the coolest." As the lunch bell rang and they stood to head back inside, Brandon looked at his friend. This brave kid who had faced death and won, who had forgiven cruelty and chosen friendship, who reminded him every day what really mattered in life. "Hey, Alex?" "Yeah? Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for learning how to be one." Alex replied with a grin. They walked back into school together, two boys with a story that would stay with them forever, a story about cruelty and compassion, about punishment and teaching, about the moment when ego gets shaved away and empathy grows in its place. Mr. Richardson's lesson had worked. Brandon had learned that true strength isn't about power or popularity or making others feel small. True strength is about empathy, about standing in someone else's shoes, about choosing kindness even when it's hard. And that lesson, like the scar of a battle well fought, would stay with Brandon for the rest of his life. The end. Over 400,000 children are diagnosed with cancer every year worldwide. Hair loss from chemotherapy isn't just a physical change, it's a visible reminder of a battle no child should have to fight alone. These children need our compassion, our support, and our advocacy. Choose kindness. Teach kindness. Live kindness. For more information about childhood cancer and how you can help, visit your local children's hospital or research foundation.